everybody. I'm Caryn Hartglass, and you are listening to It's All About Food. It's you and me today, and there's a lot to talk about. I got up this morning excited to meditate. I've mentioned before I have a morning routine that's very special to me. It's my time for a lot of self-care. And I try and get a number of things done during that time. Meditation, some language study, reading, tidying up. I prepare our water distiller because we distill our water every day. It makes a little under a gallon of water. We usually do one in the evening and one early in the day. So there are these simple things to do. I want to get as many of the essential things out of the way before actually starting my day as I think of it, even though I start my day as soon as I get up. I recently started meditating again after quite a long time. Meditation was very important to me 18 years ago when I went through my cancer journey. And I realized that I needed it very much in today's world. And my partner Gary recently over Thanksgiving, I might have mentioned this before, I don't remember, but he was tidying up our terrace outside. And he made this wonderful little meditation space that I actually am excited to go to in the morning. And it's cold out now. And I look forward to putting on my cozy winter coat and my slippers, and I go out in my pajamas and sit on this nice little settee, and it faces this simple little Buddha and candles. And I play the sounds of a babbling brook. It's very conducive for me to get me into a meditation space very quickly. I really enjoy it. It really helps me start the day, because otherwise I can wake up and my mind is racing with all these things I want to do, and I think about politics because I might read the paper and it gets me all agitated. And the meditation is grounding, it's relaxing, it's very helpful. Well, today was not as I expected. Now, we live in New York City. It's noisy here, and fortunately our apartment is pretty quiet. Although there are some big noises that can come in. But in the morning, it's typically very peaceful. And I went out there around 8 o'clock. And it was so noisy. There were kids playing some game on the schoolyard. There were trucks and beeping and honking. And it wasn't what I was looking forward to. It wasn't what I wanted in this space for me at this time. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe I have to get up earlier now in order for it to be quiet when I'm out here. It was a bit of a disappointment. And the message that I got was to go inside. Go inside. And when I finally got up to go inside, I chuckled to myself because this was a metaphor. Go inside. Go within. There are so many things we cannot control. The answers, the calm, the peace can be cultured, can be refined within. And I did go inside, and I finished my meditation inside, where it was quiet. And it's a cloudy day today. And what I usually like about going outside in the morning is we get great sun on the terrace until about noon. And I've enjoyed the heat and the warmth of the sun shining on me in my meditation. It helps me imagine being enveloped by this white, energizing, rejuvenating light that cleanses me and energizes me. And on this cloudy day, there was no light. So I really had to work on it from within. And so I did. But that metaphor, That metaphor was blaring. I cannot say enough about self-care, especially in these times where violence, evil, bullying seem to be taking over. I have numerous stories about driving. I don't like driving. I used to when I was really young. It was fun, and I would travel the open road, experiencing new places. And now I don't like driving, but sometimes I have to. And I find I'm trying to obey the traffic rules. And people are very angry. And it's like they're about to explode. There's so much road rage. People will honk as soon as the light turns green, and if you don't move instantly, they are furious at you, and they will pass you and glare at you like you're the worst thing on the earth. This rage is not helpful. And then I experienced rage this week on the subway, where I wanted to sit down. And there were 2 spaces. Gary went to one, and I was going to go to the middle one. But this woman had a bag next to her. And I was trying to politely ask her if I could sit next to her. But she had her AirPods in, listening to something. And I'm like bending down, looking at her. May I please sit down? May I sit down? May I sit down? And finally she looks at me, takes out an AirPod, and glares at me. May I please sit here? And she's not responding. And I go to sit and I touch her bag, and she picks it up. Don't you touch my bag. And she flings it at my head and hit my head. I was assaulted on the subway. And she got up and she was mumbling and grumbling and moved away. And we ultimately changed cars when it was possible. But in that moment, I did nothing. I just sat there and went inside. I went within because I knew in these times, when you engage with an event like that, you are not in control, and it can only exacerbate the situation if you stand up and try and make sense of it all. I've never been afraid of confrontation, and when I was younger, I did a lot of crazy things where I confronted people who were doing things that I felt were not right in the space, like people smoking in non-smoking places in airports all around the world. I used to tell people, stop smoking. But the energy now, the rage is so great that it's very difficult to engage in a peaceful way. And so sometimes we have to go within and let it pass. I don't have all the answers, but I am concerned that this is only going to get worse, especially with the new government that we are going to have here in the United States in January, starting January 20th. I might get into that in a little bit. But when we were on the subway after being assaulted, we were on the way to a new restaurant called Chakra. It's a Thai restaurant by May Kai-di, and I interviewed May Kai-di many years ago. I was so delighted with her. She's from Thailand, and she has another Thai restaurant in the Lower East Side. And this was in the East Village, this particular restaurant. And Gary had found it because not only did they offer vegan Thai food, but they had an SOS-free menu, a salt, oil, and sugar-free menu. They also had a fruitarian menu. And as you may know, we started on this salt, oil, sugar-free journey about 4 months ago. And it was to help me see if I could reduce my cholesterol naturally and also reduce the plaque that I discovered I had in my carotid artery. It was exciting to find out that there was this SOS-free menu. We could go to a restaurant and eat with our friends. And we met our friends, and we had a nice meal. It was funny because Plant Powered Metro NYC was having an event at this same restaurant when we were there. So I got to see some of my colleagues from that group, and that was fun. All in all, it was a nice evening, aside from the event that happened in the subway. I got past that. It was funny because the woman who threw the bag at me, the bag was a Target bag, a red bag with that white Target on it. And now whenever I see white Target bags, which is all the time, it's a little bit of a trigger. Look out for red Target bags. So here's an update on my SOS-free journey. I started the end of July, and at the 3-month marker, which was the end of October, I had a blood test. My cholesterol went down from it was hovering in the 240, 260 range, and it went down to 212. That is significant. Now, of course, I'd like it under 200. I'd like it under 180. But this is a work in progress. And my LDL also went down. And I have lost 12 to 13 pounds. Most of the weight I lost quickly in the first month. It was a surprise because I wasn't doing this for weight loss. But as I've read from things Dr. Furman has written, and along with some other doctors, carrying a few extra pounds can cause plaque. And I never thought of myself as overweight. I've been stable at the same weight for decades, since high school. But I like being slimmer. And I don't look skinny. I look good. So all of this has been a very positive journey. Now, as you may know, I began my activism a long time ago with the mission or the drive to help reduce pain and suffering, especially with non-human animals. I became a vegetarian, and then I became a vegan. I've been vegan for 36 years. I've been doing this podcast for 15 years, and my mission is to make vegans and to somehow help in any way I can at reducing pain and suffering for the animals we use for food, the animals we use for clothing. It's very challenging. And the problem is we live in a capitalistic society. And the goal in a capitalistic society is to profit. Profit at any cost. Profit without bounds. And this is a problem because when people create businesses to profit and only profit, abuse happens. And we see this abuse horrifically with animal agriculture. Now, of course, I don't want animals to be slaughtered for food and slaughtered for clothing. That's wrong. But in our society, that's considered okay. And what we do to profit is to abuse the animals that are being raised to slaughter, and we abuse the humans that work to make this happen. It's an abusive industry because capitalism is driving profit. And there's a certain amount of manipulation in our culture, in society, this hierarchical culture. Non-human animals are clearly at the very bottom. White men are at the top. White women are maybe below that, or other men of color somewhere. And then women of color are below that, and children, and non-human animals. Of course, somewhere in there are non-binary people, transgender people, people with disabilities. Our society likes to put down people who do not meet our expectations of the ideal. I don't know how to change this, but it's not good. I quoted last week, and I'm going to do it again because the movie Wicked is trending. You may or may not have liked it if you've seen it. I enjoyed it. I think it's got a lot of great messages. But one of the underlying themes is the wizard wanting to subjugate the talking animals, quiet and cage the talking animals. And then says the best way to bring people together is to give them a good enemy. And when we focus on individuals that are, quote, different, we can make them an enemy. We can make them a campaign issue. And that's what the Republican Party did, where they made transgender people a campaign issue when there were so many other big issues. It's a distraction. It's a distraction so they can go off and do other things and not take care of the real issues that this country has. And it's a distraction while they can go and reduce taxes on the rich and not take care of the middle class, not help the middle class, not help the poor, take away entitlements, take away our Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. These are all big plans for the incoming administration. But you have to create an enemy. You have to create an enemy, you have to bully, you have to talk down about people. And we do this naturally with animals. Our society is hierarchical, and we keep people down, we keep persons down, because non-human animals should also be considered persons. And along with that, I was just thinking recently, it's interesting that the society that we live in has so many ideals, and many people are just uncomfortable in their skin because of the demands society puts on us. And it's not just the way we live, the clothes we wear, the food that we eat. Society makes it like you should eat animals because if you're affluent or you can afford it, that's the food we want to eat. And it's a bad message, but the message continues. And it tells us we need to look a certain way. And people will get nose jobs and get their ears pinned and get their breasts lifted, enlarged or reduced, or their butts lifted. These activities are accepted. They're accepted like eating animals are accepted. And so I wonder, why is there such an outrage about changing our gender? It seems like an extension to all of these other transformations. And what I envision for a world, what I envision is a world where every baby born gets the care it needs to thrive without any socialization, without any gender conformity or expectations. I remember when I was growing up, as a young girl, I was expected to play with girl toys. And even though I was fascinated with building blocks and gas stations, I was encouraged to play with girl toys. This isn't right. And yet people go on and harp about trans women athletes playing in women's sports. And this is crazy. We are not asking the right questions, and we are not looking at the big picture. Professional athletes, competitive athletes, it's all part of the capitalistic world of sports, and it's not fair. Why should we have teams that are separated by men and women to begin with? Because our belief is that men will outperform? What would happen if we gave every child the same opportunity to pursue what they wanted to? I think there'd be many more women athletes to excel. And maybe sports competitions and team selections should not be based on gender, but maybe other parameters like size, weight, like in the levels in boxing. Really, we can figure this out so that it is fair for all. But it's just been made a big issue as a distraction. And there are much bigger issues to take care of, like health insurance. And we've all been following the sensational news about the United Healthcare CEO who was murdered. And it's funny how other murders don't make the headlines every day. I was just looking at murder rates. For example, in New York in 2020, we had 808 total murders. And in the United States in 2020, 21,570. How many of those made front page news days and days and days in a row? But this particular event was different because the person who was murdered was a very rich person who had power. And what's come out of it, of course, is that UnitedHealthcare has been denying all kinds of medical procedures for people, the highest rate of all insurance. They've been making insane profits while hurting people, harming people. This gets to me personally because when I was going through my cancer journey in 2006, this was before Obamacare. I had an insurance plan with a company that was brand new, and at first they seemed really fantastic. I could get a blood test whenever I wanted. I didn't need approval. But as my cancer expenses started adding up, I had over $100,000 that I owed to 20 different providers. And when I finished my cancer treatment after 15 months, I was very fortunate. I was 15 months, 3 surgeries, 2 rounds of chemotherapy. They were 4-month rounds of chemotherapy, and I had to do it twice. But that was all wrapped up in 15 months, and I've been healthy ever since. And after all that, the bills started coming in. It took me 3 years of persistent letter writing and phone calls to get every one of those 20 claims taken care of. Either they reduced the amount, or they waived the amount, or somebody else paid, like the insurance company got the provider to pay, or the provider got the insurance company to forget about it. There were mistakes made. It was crazy, and it's only gotten worse. People who are ill should not have to fight for coverage. That's why we need Medicare for all, and it needs to be comprehensive and fair. But meanwhile, we have an incoming government that say they have a concept of a plan. Now, the incoming president tried to undo Obamacare in the first 4 years of his administration, and then he said he saved Obamacare. It's all just lies. And of course, there's no plan for new health care, because that's all the incoming administration does, and the incoming president does, is lie and lie and lie and lie and lie. And people, as you know, start to believe the lies when they hear them enough. But back to this problem we have glorifying very rich people. People shouldn't be making billions of dollars or millions and millions of dollars, especially in a society where there are people that can't afford a home, can't afford to feed their children, can't afford to send children to the colleges that they are admitted to because the tuition is insanely overpriced. And meanwhile, the professors that teach in many of these schools, assistant professors, adjunct professors, they're not making any money. There is a great imbalance. And I bring all of this up because it's an illness in our capitalistic society, and it also affects animals, which has been my inspiration all along to help the voiceless. And we were talking about sports earlier and how professional sports, even college sports, none of it's really fair. And yet you've got professional athletes. You've heard of the recent New York Mets agreeing to pay Juan Soto $765 million in a 15-year contract. That's awesome. $765 million for one person. Can you imagine? Is this person really so much better than the rest of us? The average salary of many Americans is somewhere around $50,000, and that hasn't changed in a very long time. And then, of course, there are the women athletes, and we want women athletes to make as much as men athletes, right? And of course, some of them are making a lot of money, but they're not making anywhere near that the men are. And they get their 10 million or something for 4 million or 10 million annual salaries plus their million in endorsements. And let's not forget actors, the famous ones. Not most of the stage actors who make next to nothing. Even if you work on Broadway, it's kind of hard to live in Manhattan because it's so expensive. But the movie actors and some of the musicians are very, very, very wealthy. And some of them, like Billie Eilish, for example, we like her. She's vegan. And she makes the venues that she performs in serve vegan food. All of that's good. People that have the power, people that have the financial backing, should use it for good. But unfortunately, it's like the power of the ring in The Lord of the Rings. Power can take over, make us want more money, more power, more control. It's really quite something. Just to wrap this up, I just want to say, privatizing healthcare and allowing our government to determine what we can do with our bodies leads to evil. Banning abortion leads to women's death. How is that? There have been more abortions since the bans have gone into place. Many women that can go somewhere else to be able to have the procedure, but there are women who want their babies and have complications. And there are many doctors now who are in the states that ban abortions. They're afraid to do what is required for these women's health, to protect these women. And some of them die. This isn't something that helps society. This is evil. This is misogynistic. This is a form of control. And denying people coverage of medical procedures. And we hear that Blue Cross Blue Shield wanted to limit anesthesia for procedures. Something that should be determined in the moment during a procedure by a qualified doctor. Not by bean counters for an insurance company trying to maximize profits. What do we call this? White-collar crimes? But somehow people who have been able to collect so much money, to be able to win so much money, to be able to gain so much money, they also gain power. And they get a certain amount of protection. Because we idolize them? Because we think they're better? Because we think they deserve what they've managed to attain? Even if it's been through unfair methods, corrupt methods, by lying, by cheating, by stealing, by abusing. Of course, one thing that nobody talks about, or at least very few people, when we talk about healthcare, okay, we know that healthcare in the United States is a disaster, and it's not working, and it's outrageously expensive, and few people are profiting from it, and many people are dying from it. Let's put that aside for a minute. The real problem is that we don't eat well in this country, and the food that most people consume is increasing the risk of all kinds of chronic diseases that we know are preventable, that we know are reversible. And this is something that the government can do to help us. They can offer delicious, healthy meals in schools and not require children drink dairy milk. There can be all kinds of advertising campaigns pointing to foods that are healthy and make it cool and fun to consume them. And there can be subsidies, tax benefits for people who grow and produce healthy foods, and perhaps tax consequences for those that are making junk snack foods, highly processed foods, and certainly animal foods. We should be paying the true cost of food. And when it comes to animal and junk foods, we are not. Well, we are indirectly. We're paying through taxes. Healthcare costs would come down substantially if people were following a healthy lifestyle. That's what responsible eating and living is all about. The nonprofit that my partner Gary and I founded. Responsible eating and living. Consuming food that nourishes our body, doesn't sicken it, and having a lifestyle that is conducive to promoting health and well-being. We have a lot of work to do, and there are many of us that are there, that want to see a better world, want to see a different world, want to see a just and fair society. So for all of you out there who are listening, for those of you that are angry, for those of you who are frustrated and disappointed with where the world is going, with where the country is going. You are not alone. And we are all in this together. I invite you, I encourage you to find the self-care that you need to keep you strong, to keep you inspired, to keep you able to experience joy in your own life, in your own way, even though there's so much craziness around us. Because that's the only way we can make a better world. I wanted to spend the next part of this program talking about a couple of articles that came out recently. One was in the New York Times this past week, entitled, "How the Messy Process of Milking Cows Can Spread Bird Flu." We've been talking about bird flu for quite some time. I want to bring up Dr. Michael Greger, wrote a book about it years ago that he updated when the COVID pandemic came about. We've been talking about bird flu for a long time with the concern that it can jump to humans and make us very sick and maybe kill us, right? And so bird flu has been slowly increasing, and we've wiped out many birds that have had it in very inhumane ways. I shouldn't even use the word inhumane or humane because they assume certain things about humans, but let's just say in very cruel ways. And now bird flu has hit the nation's dairy farms. The New York Times reports that since March, the virus has infected more than 700 herds in 15 states and has infected at least 58 people, nearly all of them farm workers. Okay, and California is the epicenter of the outbreak. Is anybody concerned? Yeah. So this H5N1, this bird flu, it is very troubling. And what's interesting is they show a particular farm in this article, and they show what they do to prevent the spread of virus, or at least to make the product clean and sanitary. And have you seen these pictures? First of all, I'm surprised that they let them in to show it, but I guess that they're kind of proud of their procedures. But they show a worker who is responsible for cleaning and disinfecting each tit by dipping them in iodine, attaching a milking claw, drawing out the milk, and then the different things that they do to clean the hoses and the pipes and the whole system. But you look at it, and it's filthy. Everything about this reeks filth and germs. You look at the animals, and their legs are covered with dirt and possibly shit, because they live in such a filthy environment. It's not their fault. It's the humans' fault for keeping them confined in these horrific places for milking. So if you're invited, if you can access the New York Times, you might want to look at this system and see them being milked, the cows. And then they talk about how some robotic methods might be a better alternative because the humans won't be as involved, and so there's less chance of humans becoming contaminated by drops of milk splashing on them wherever. And the robotic milking systems seem to be more efficient. But the whole thing is insane. I use this word all the time because it's insane what we do. I've been meaning to write to Senator Schumer because he's been talking about bailing out the dairy industry here in New York. This is an industry that is failing financially, even with all of their abuses. to maximize profit. They are losing money. The taxpayer has to bail them out. And what I want to recommend, and if you're into letter writing, I invite you to do the same to your representatives about dairy industries that may be in your community, is to suggest that we don't bail them out because the industry is a flawed industry that is damaging to the environment, that creates a product that is not healthy for humans and causes a lot of abuse to the human workers in addition to the animal victims that are there. And encourage that they find funding to help people in the dairy industry transition to a better industry, transition to better things to farm, like mushrooms or berries. They can use their land, they maybe could even use some of their equipment to make better products, make plant milks, for example. There are people who have done this. It's not novel, and this is where we should be going. This makes sense, rather than continuing to support insanity. And looking at the pictures in this New York Times article, you see all the fancy equipment, all the technology. There's so much money that has gone into mechanizing this industry to be able to abuse more animals, to be able to make more profit, with the ultimate goal to reduce costs, to make more profit. And it's failing. And we need to do more. We need to do something about it. It needs to stop. And just remember that in this hierarchical culture, the animals, the cows in this case, are there to serve us, the superior humans, and provide us with milk to feed our babies, and cheese, and ultimately meat to nourish us. And what happens? In some cases, it gives children type 1 diabetes right on early in their life. And then it can increase the risk, especially of breast, prostate, and ovarian cancers. And the cheese products have so much saturated fat that they increase our risk of chronic diseases. And then all of those poor milked animals, when they are considered spent, they are slaughtered for hamburger, which is another product that is not healthy for us. All the while, these poor animals are spewing methane gas and other greenhouse gases that are polluting the environment, polluting our water. Their excrement is polluting our water, and their burps and farts are polluting the air and adding greenhouse gases that are causing global warming. Now I want to move on to another article about a new research study where beans and peas rank best as meat and milk replacements from nutritional, health, environmental, and cost perspectives. This is from a new study led by an Oxford Martin researcher, Dr. Marco Springman of the Oxford Martin Program on the Future of Food, Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford, and Institute for Global Health at University College London. And they report that the study combined nutrition, health, environmental, and cost assessments to compare the impacts of meat and milk with replacement products. The study assessed traditional products such as tofu and tempeh, processed alternatives such as veggie burgers and plant milks, prospective products such as lab-grown beef, as well as unprocessed foods such as soybeans and peas. Well. Are we surprised by these findings? Of course not. It's old news. But we need more and more of this news in order to move the belief system in our medical community, in our educational community, and in our society. It takes a long time and it takes a lot of work. But I'm celebrating it. I'm going to continue from this article. The findings show that unprocessed plant-based foods such as soybeans, peas, and beans are best suited for replacing meat and dairy. Can we say that they're even better than meat and dairy? Yes! Choosing legumes over meat and milk would reduce nutritional imbalances in high-income countries like the US, the UK, and Europe by half. Mortality, in particular from diet-related diseases, by 1/10. The environmental impacts of diets such as greenhouse gas emissions, land use, and water use by more than half, and costs by more than 1/3. And for those of you out there that want to minimize cost and maximize profits, this should get your interest. It would minimize costs, but it doesn't necessarily maximize profit, unfortunately. Dr. Springman says reducing meat and dairy in high-income countries is essential for limiting climate change, biodiversity loss, and improving health. We've been saying this for decades, but I love reading it in print. It always makes my heart pitter-patter a little bit to think, okay, science is on our side. But then we have an incoming government that wants to debunk science and not pay attention to science, so that we can profit more and be unregulated, because regulation thwarts business and we bow to business. No, we need regulation. We need regulation to protect our society, because everyone on this planet breathes the same air, drinks the same water. We use the same soil. And those of us who are polluting the air and the water and soil, unfortunately, it seems to impact the developing nations more than the high-income countries. Anyway, the article continues saying, despite not being the front runner, processed plant-based foods such as veggie burgers and plant milk still resulted in substantial benefits, when replacing meat and dairy, but the emissions reductions and health improvements were 1/5 to 1/3 less than when choosing unprocessed legumes, and costs to the consumer were 1/10 higher than those of current diets. Unprocessed legumes such as peas and beans were the clear winner in the assessment. I continue because there's important information here. They performed well from all perspectives, including nutritional, health, environmental, and costs. And a surprising runner-up was tempeh, a traditional Indonesian food made from fermented soybeans, which retains much of the nutritional properties of soybeans without much processing or additives. Also, I love this part. The surprising finding was for lab-grown meat. Despite high uncertainties, the existing data suggests it is not a competitive product, not even for normal meat. At current technologies, its emissions can be as high as those of beef burgers at up to 40,000 times its costs, while its health impacts when replicating beef would be similarly bad. Okay. I just love to read all of this, but it's also frustrating because why? Here on It's All About Food, we've been saying this for how long? For a long time. We've known for a long time that the whole food plant diet of minimally processed plant foods is the ideal human diet and is also the gentlest on the planet and the kindest to the animals. And let me add one thing. It can be the most delicious way to eat. I love my food. It is not difficult and it is not impossible to eat a healthy whole food plant diet, even SOS-free, with organization and planning. I just want to give some examples. So it's been a busy few weeks for me, and I'm not always home. And sometimes I'll leave early in the morning. And when I know that I have to leave early in the morning, I plan my breakfast. So I'll take a jar and I'll fill it with 2 tablespoons of chia or flax seeds, a 1/2 cup of rolled oats, a 1/2 cup of unsweetened soy milk made from soybeans and water, a 1/2 cup of water, I stir this all together, and then I might chop an apple, a banana, and I'll top it off with maybe a cup of frozen berries, like blueberries, mixed berries, strawberries. I stir this all up in a jar, and it becomes the most wonderful, wonderful, delightful, sweet, satisfying breakfast. I take it on the road, and it's there when I need it. I could make it the night before. I could make it in the morning. It's quick, and it's just like the yummiest thing. I can't believe it. Okay, some people call it overnight oats. Some people call it soaked oats. You don't have to add oats, but I like to get the flax seeds or the chia seeds in there because they're part of my new regimen of eating SOS-free and getting my 60 minutes plus exercise. I also do 2 tablespoons of flaxseed or chia seeds, and I like to know that I've gotten them in the morning, so that's done. The other thing that I do that I've mentioned numerous times now, I'm going to mention it again because I'm just so in love with it, is I make about, how many cups? I don't know. I have a small Instant Pot, and I make 4 big ball jars of soup. This week it was green lentil. Last week it was brown lentils. Yeah. I chop up a bunch of celery, a bunch of carrots, a bunch of onions. I soak the beans overnight or during the day, and when I'm ready later on in the day, I'll use them. I'll drain them, rinse them, add them to the pot, fill the pot to the line of maximum level liquid. I'll add some herbs and spices. This week it was 2 tablespoons of marjoram, which I like because it has like a sweetness to it. And then some smoked paprika, a little pepper, some onion powder, and I stir it all up and set it for 10 minutes high pressure on the Instant Pot, and it's done. I fill up the jars, I kind of spill all over the place, I clean everything up, and then the rest of the week I have this wonderful food that is ready to add to a meal or be a meal in itself. I can't say enough about it, and plus it's inexpensive. I buy organic legumes, organic lentils, organic split peas, organic garbanzo beans, and I make my own soup, which has no sodium in it, doesn't have to come in a can, and it's ready when I want it, and it's exactly as I want it. And if you need help coming up with a recipe for soup, well, I spoke with Nava Atlas last week, who has that wonderful Soups and Stews for All Seasons book. It's a great place to get started making soup. We also have soup recipes on our website, but I remind you, you just take 4 or 5 or 6 stalks of celery, rinse them because they can be dirty, clean them, split them in half lengthwise, and then chop them into small pieces. Take 4, 5, 6 carrots. I like the colored ones where you get purple and orange and white together. And I cut off the top and the bottom. I don't peel them because they're organic, and the peel contains nutrients. You could either split them lengthwise or not, and then chop them in little circles. And then I peel an onion, either red or white or yellow. I don't discriminate. They're all wonderful. And then you can chop it however you can. If you know how to professionally chop an onion, great, good for you. I don't. Just remember, roll your fingers back so you don't cut your fingers, and slice them into chunks. Sometimes I leave them big, sometimes I make them small. You can add fresh garlic if you want. And you throw them all in the pot with the water and the legume, herbs and spices. Now, I have an extensive selection of herbs and spices. That's who I am. I like to have a big choice, but you might have some favorite mixes. You could add some curry powder. You can add some herbe de Provence or some dill. I love dill in soup. And experiment. Try something one time if you don't like it. Or if it's not enough, add more. It's not difficult, and it's inexpensive, and it's there when you need it. And then, of course, the base of this SOS-free thing, is to have a giant salad. Everyday giant. I've been saying this for years, but I wasn't doing it every day. And now I am. And it makes such a difference. And it's really good to eat the salad first before the other things that you've made, because it fills you up. It fills you up with fiber and nutrients and good things. And the dressing does not have to be complicated. It does help to have a high-powered blender, but you could use a regular blender too. We use sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds, blending them with vinegar and water, all to taste. You could add more vinegar if you like it vinegary or less if you don't. And the seed provides the creamy fat base instead of oil. And then you could get creative too with herbs and spices. We don't usually put any in, but sometimes onion powder or even a piece of onion or a piece of garlic blended in. And then you could use Italian spices, oregano if you want to give it an Italian flavor with red wine vinegar. I like using balsamic vinegar a lot because it's sweet. We like sweet. And rice wine vinegar can add a different flavor. It's up to you, and the combinations are endless. And if you had a favorite oil and vinegar kind of dressing with the seasonings, just replace the oil with a seed. You can soak the seed and drain it. It makes it softer and easier to blend if you want to, but it's not necessary. The holidays are coming up, and I always like to make cookies and pies, and we go to cookie parties, and I'm trying to think how we're going to make this work. And we've already decided we're going to make a bunch of cookies because we have too much sugar and vegan butter in the refrigerator that we haven't used. So we're going to make a bunch of vegan cookies that we give to other people who don't have a problem consuming cookies with sugar and oil. And that's cool. And if we're going to eat food that isn't necessarily the most nutritious for us, it should be free of animal products. That's a no-brainer. We can have all the cookies and cakes and treats we want that are vegan. Have a party. Go for it. Just leave the butter, the dairy butter, and the eggs out of it. We don't need those things. I'm actually thinking of making a lemon meringue pie just because I find it so much fun to make, and whipping the meringue with the aquafaba. I have tons of aquafaba because I make chickpeas all the time in the Instant Pot, and I save the bean water, and it's there in the freezer waiting to be whipped into a frenzy. And so I think I just might do that. And although I have been 100% salt, oil, sugar-free, and I intend to stay on that path until my plaque is gone, I might taste the meringue pie. Just a little tiny half spoonful or something. But more importantly, I'm happy to share it with other people who will really enjoy it. And if you can't believe you can make a vegan lemon meringue pie, I am going to leave a link to our recipe with this podcast. I hope you enjoy it. But then, I still like desserts. And my favorite right now, I made it for Thanksgiving, is our traditional pecan pie, a raw pecan pie that was originated by Gina Hamshaw, who I interviewed centuries ago on this podcast. And I revised it. And I made it completely SOS-free. The original recipe has coconut oil in it, and I left that out. And I add cacao nibs to give that chocolate flavor instead of chocolate chips or something with sugar in it. And, oh my God, I love it so much. I love it so much. I'm looking forward to that. And the great thing about it, I find, is that a little sliver is very satisfying. It's so rich because it's full of dates that you don't need a lot. And that's another thing about whole, minimally processed plant foods. They are satisfying. Unlike many, many desserts where you have a piece and you want another piece and another piece. When you eat a rich dessert like this particular pecan pie, you can't eat that much. You don't want to eat that much. It is so satisfyingly sweet. And because it's full of fiber, there's just no way you can eat the whole pie. Well, maybe some people can, but I can't. So I wanted to leave you on a sweet note because, as I mentioned in the beginning, self-care is essential. And we do that with meditation. We do that going within. We do that with exercise. We do that with feeding ourselves with good nutrition, nutritionally dense food, and sometimes a sweet treat. But sweet treats can be nutritious and good for us as well. Okay, just one more thing before I go. This literally just came into my inbox. I just learned that this podcast, It's All About Food, has been selected as one of the top 70 food podcasts on the web by the Feedspot.com group. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know anything about it. I went to the link, which I will post in this podcast, And It's All About Food is listed as number 14. So not only are we included as one of the top 70, but oh my goodness, we're listed as number 14. It's All About Food. Thank you so much for being a part of making that happen. And thank you for listening. For those who have been with me since 2009, I am so grateful. And for those who are just joining, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And a giant shout out to the entire Progressive Radio Network team who have been there since the beginning, supporting me and making this podcast possible. Woo! We're winners. That's our show today. I'm Caryn Hartglass. You've been listening to It's All About Food. Thank you for joining me. You can visit me at Responsible Eating and Living, the nonprofit that I co-founded with my partner Gary DiMattei. You can find recipes there. You can find all 15 years of this program archived there. Please reach out to me if you have any comments and questions. I love hearing from you. My email is info@realmeals.org. And my last request, if you listen on any podcast app, if you can rate us there, give us a nice rating, give us a comment, I would really appreciate that. We need to all work together as a community if we are going to make improvements on this planet, especially in the next year coming. We have a lot of work to do. Stay strong, take care of yourself, and occasionally indulge yourself in a sweet, raw, organic, vegan pecan pie. Have a delicious week.